the analysis of Greco-Roman influence on contemporary illustration, one can find a relationship between physical qualities and common philosophies, whether these ideas were directly considered or simply a result of human history and our continual growth/expansion, and return to similar fascinations. In doing so, let's start from a place of discussing ancient practices and creativity. Mind you, this conversation will bridge Greece and Rome to some degree, as there exists a close connection between the two in terms of 1. How recast plus modification of pre-existing Greek pieces worked as means of transforming technique and acting as a source of inspiration in Rome, and 2. How such approaches in Rome acted as preservation of ancient Greek works, both physically and figuratively. Passionate, intellectual liberation, and representation. An interest in the physical form in its natural state, imitation and emulation, and crossing the bridge from the early Greek idyllic to something eventually truer to life, we see to a transformation of ideals and portraits of the human figure, to the attention to form, a more dynamic and a more expressive depiction in our narrative. This attention and awareness of humanity sees to an increasing appreciation for the naturalistic, and eventually theatrical composition, such standards that are revisited for centuries to come. See to the changes occurring in High Classical, then Late Classical, and ushering in of the Hellenistic in sculpture. From something like Aphrodite of Cnidus, we begin to see wake of this humanization, despite such idealization of the subject, or goddess, still evident. But let's dig into something later in antiquity, for comparison and evidence of stylization. The Townley Greyhounds is a Roman marble statue from the 1st to 2nd century, restored sometime in the 18th century. It features 2 dogs, dubbed as greyhounds, playing in a detailed, lifelike piece with a smooth texture reminiscent of a short, slick-furred hunting dog. The 2 hounds are thin and lean, with one turning its head outward while the other playfully nibbles at the former's ear, in a lively juxtaposition of both implied character and positive and negative spacing. There's something to be said about these dogs and their interaction. A depiction that leans into something so universally familiar and ever as attentive to the concept and analysis of form from that of the natural world. While an example non-human, we see the same sense of observation and of expression from a physical, anatomically correct set of figures engaging in ordinary play. Should this work be arguably ideal to some degree, let us look at something more clearly Hellenistic from the second half of the 4th century BC, a molded clay figurine in the Louvre's collection. While a less iconic sculpt, the incomplete figurine offers telltale signs of Hellenistic artwork, subjects grounded in reality, where the markings of age are portrayed more in tune with actuality than high standards of beauty and class. While seemingly unconventional in the eyes of idealists seeking elements of perfection, the elderly, wrinkled, and hunched-over man offers a more realistic glimpse into everyday life and of the common people, an appeal that allows for diversified topics, commentaries, and sought-after depictions of contrasting identities. So let's talk about illustration in the modern world, namely its practices, aesthetics, and general points of the present-day artist's many intrigues. To do so, we'll focus on a selection, as we must bear in mind that said present day offers a plethora of styles, interests, and so on. We're hardly even scratching the surface here. If it wasn't clear by a stroll through a museum or scroll through social media, the very world of the arts is ever expansive, its work impacted by a plethora of factors, with some even beyond our comprehension. So what do we have in common, outside of the more obvious, like a study session or insertion of mythological imagery, really? While seemingly broad, I find there exists an indirect influence in the very approach of present-day artists and those of ancient worlds. Our attentiveness to form and a desire to relay our perception of beauty within our world, focusing on artistic endeavors that provide a tantalizing mixture of emotional elicitation and observational musings. In the case of mythos and/or emphasis on tragedy, there's a desirable quality in pulling from Greek works of art as an act of reflection, whether regarding self or something more worldly, like the state of social/political matters. If you're anything like me, I crave drama and intense expressive narratives in the media I consume, an idea not dissimilar to Greco-Roman focuses. We tend to spot this more easily in certain subject matters, contextualization of age-old stories, or even in symbolism. However, it should be noted that these qualities are not always inherently apparent, and such comparisons could even be gathered simply on assumptions based off commonalities. Again, though, we ought to consider the global impact of past art movements and their everlasting impacts, whether direct or indirect, on the present day. In closing with the contemporary's familiar air with that of the qualities revered in an ancient age, I find it appropriate to highlight that with a shared kalos, like it's so eloquently put in Beauty, the fortunes of an ancient Greek idea.